The hospital felt different at night, quieter, slower, almost suspended in time. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above the empty corridors, and the smell of disinfectant lingered in the air like a constant reminder that life and loss lived side by side here. Emily adjusted her badge as she walked toward the nurses' station, her steps steady despite the fatigue pressing behind her eyes. Night shifts had become her routine not because she loved them, but because they fit the life she had built after everything else had fallen apart. Fewer people, fewer questions, fewer reminders. She poured herself a cup of lukewarm coffee and glanced at the clock. 2:17 a.m., still hours to go. During the day, the hospital was loud and chaotic. Families crowded the halls, doctors rushed between rooms, and emotions spilled over constantly. At night, everything felt more honest. Patients slept. Machines beeped softly, and the staff moved quietly, as if afraid to disturb something fragile. Emily liked that. She reviewed charts, checked vitals, and spoke in hushed tones to patients who couldn't sleep. Most of them didn't want medical answers. They wanted company, a voice, proof that they weren't alone. Between rounds, she leaned against the counter and stared down the hallway. Her reflection stared back from the darkened window, tired eyes, hair pulled into a practical bun, a face that looked older than it should have. She told herself she preferred it this way. Predictable, controlled, safe. Yet sometimes, in moments like this, when the hospital seemed to breathe along with her, she wondered if she had made her world too small. A door opened at the far end of the corridor. Footsteps echoed softly, unfamiliar, but unheard. Emily barely looked up, assuming it was another staff member finishing a late consult. She didn't know yet that this quiet night, so much like all the others, was about to change the rhythm of her carefully ordered life. Emily was updating a patient's chart when a voice broke the silence. "Sorry, do you know where room 412 is?" She looked up. The man standing a few feet away wore dark scrubs and a slightly uncertain expression, as if he wasn't used to asking for directions. His badge read Daniel Brooks, respiratory therapist, 4th floor, East Wing, she said automatically. Then she paused. "You're on the wrong side of the building?" He let out a quiet laugh. "That explains a lot." She pointed down the hall. "Elevators, that way. 3rd door on the left when you get off." "Thanks," he said, then hesitated. "Night shift, unfortunately," she replied. "Same," he said. Relief softening his face. "Makes you forget what day it is." She nodded, surprised by how easily the conversation flowed. It was nothing special, just small talk between exhausted co-workers, but something about his tone made it feel lighter. "Well," he said, stepping back, "I won't keep you." "Thanks again." "No problem," she answered. He walked away, his footsteps fading into the quiet corridor. Emily returned to her chart, but her focus slipped. She replayed the exchange in her mind, searching for a reason it lingered. It had been brief, ordinary, and yet, as she sipped her coffee, she found herself glancing down the hallway again, half expecting him to reappear. Over the next few weeks, Emily began to notice Daniel everywhere. Not all at once, not dramatically, just in fragments, passing each other near the elevators, exchanging nods in the hallway, sharing brief updates about patients who overlapped between their departments. Sometimes it was just a smile, sometimes a quick comment about how long the night felt. One evening, she found a sticky note on the nurses' station. "Wrong elevator again? Guess I'm consistent." "Daniel," she stared at it longer than necessary, then shook her head, amused despite herself. Later that night, she spotted him near the supply room. "You're learning the layout yet?" she asked. "Slowly," he said. "I think the building rearranges itself after midnight." They talked for 5 minutes about work, about coffee that never tasted right at night, about how strange it was to live on opposite schedules from the rest of the world. 5 minutes became 10. Eventually, a pager beeped. Reality rushed back in. "Duty calls," she said. "Always does," he replied. As they walked away in opposite directions, Emily felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not excitement exactly, Something quieter, warmer. Their interactions stayed small, careful. A shared vending machine snack, a conversation cut short by alarms, a note left behind after a missed encounter. She told herself it was harmless, just connection, in a place that often felt impersonal. Still, she began to look forward to those stolen minutes more than she cared to admit. The first real conversation happened by accident. Emily had stayed late after her shift, finishing paperwork she couldn't bring herself to do earlier. Daniel was there too, sitting in the empty break room, staring into a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "Couldn't leave?" he answered. They sat across from each other, the silence comfortable in a way that surprised her. He told her he had transferred from another hospital after a breakup that had left him questioning everything. She admitted that night shifts weren't just a preference, they were a retreat. Neither of them shared details. Just enough truth to feel honest. "This probably isn't smart," Daniel said quietly. "No," Emily agreed. Yet neither stood up. They both knew the lines: professional, emotional, invisible, but firm. And they both felt how close they were to crossing them. When Emily finally left the room, her heart felt heavier than before. The connection was no longer abstract. It had weight, meaning, and that scared her. Avoiding Daniel became impossible. Their paths crossed too often, their conversations too natural. What had once felt manageable now pulsed beneath the surface, demanding attention. Emily caught herself listening for his voice, watching the clock when she knew his shift overlapped with hers. She hated that part of her, the part that wanted more. One night, a patient coded unexpectedly, the room filled with urgency, voices overlapping, hands moving fast. Daniel was there, focused, calm, steady. Afterward, they stood in the hallway, adrenaline slowly fading. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, though her hands were still shaking. "I'm glad you were there," she said before she could stop herself. The words hung between them. "So am I," he replied softly. That was the moment Emily knew pretending wasn't enough anymore. Emily pulled back. She kept conversations short, avoided eye contact, changed routes through the hospital when she could. Daniel noticed immediately. The silence hurt more than the uncertainty ever had. At home, Emily lay awake during the day, replaying moments she couldn't undo. She told herself distance was the responsible choice. But responsibility didn't make the ache go away. One morning, as her shift ended, she found another note. "I miss talking to you." She folded it carefully and slipped it into her pocket, unsure whether it hurt or helped. They met outside the hospital, just once. No scrubs, no pagers, just two tired people sitting across from each other in a quiet cafe. "This isn't fair," Emily said, "to either of us." "I know," Daniel replied, "but pretending we don't feel it isn't fair either." They spoke honestly for the first time, without interruption. About fear, about timing, about how some connections arrive when you're least prepared. When they stood to leave, there were no promises, just understanding. Back at the hospital, things felt different but lighter. Emily still worked nights. Daniel still passed through her world in brief moments. The feelings didn't disappear, but they softened, reshaped into something quieter. Sometimes growth meant choosing peace over possibility. And as Emily walked the familiar corridors once more, she realized her world hadn't become smaller after all. It had simply changed.